Caribbean American Forum.
Okay, good afternoon to you. Welcome back to the Caribbean American Forum. I'm your host, Brickford Burke. Joining us now is the opposition leader of Guyana, Mr. David Granger. He is also chair of the APNU coalition, which is part of the combined opposition that constitutes the majority of Guyana's parliament. Mr. Granger, welcome to the Caribbean American Forum. Thank you for taking time off of your busy schedule to join us on the forum today.
Thank you for having me, Brickford.
Let's start by the recent controversy, if you may, over whether or not the APNU had agreed to a deal to increase the electricity tariffs in Linden. Over the last couple of days, there have been a bit of uproar by Lindeners, having heard an announcement by the Prime Minister Sam Hinds in Parliament that the APNU, which were APNU coalition, which was in negotiations with the government, had agreed with them for a gradual increase in the electricity tariffs. This outraged Lindeners, and the APNU had to do some PR work for its message to get out. Why didn't the APNU challenge the Prime Minister immediately once that announcement was made in Parliament?
Well, you're quite right. We did have discussions, but there was no agreement about the imposition of the increased tariffs. What we did assert, or what we did insist on, was the need to deal with certain economic and social issues in Region 10 as a whole, and Linden in particular. We did not agree that the tariff hikes would be imposed until the economic measures that we recommended were put in place and had started to function. When the Prime Minister used the language gradualism, in fact, in the National Assembly, I walked across the aisle afterwards and asked him to clarify what he meant by gradualism, because what we're talking about is not a simultaneous action. What we're speaking about was the introduction of measures after the economic measures had brought about an improvement in the livelihood of the people in Linden and Region 10 as a whole. So there seems to have been some misunderstanding, but we went up to Linden and we made it very clear that we did not support the imposition of higher tariffs for electricity this year. What we did say is that we wanted to see certain economic changes, and once those changes were given an opportunity to work over the next couple of years, then the debate or the discussion on the imposition of higher tariffs would have been resumed.
Very well. And I know that you were in consultation over the last few days with residents of the Linden community. What has been their response to your explanation of your position on the tariffs?
We had a visit to what is called a stakeholders forum last evening. Dr. Rupen Ryan and myself were present. There are a lot of questions. There are concerns among the people in Linden because the People's Progressive Party civic administration has made promises before. But we made it clear that we're not acting on promises unless the PPPC administration delivered real development, delivered real responses to the demands of the Lindeners for improvement in their quality of life. There wouldn't be any increase in the tariffs. So my understanding, having spoken with the people face to face, is that they are satisfied with the explanations we gave. I think there had to be some mischief in terms of the reports which had been passing in the community, that there was an agreement for the imposition of higher tariffs, but there was nothing of the sort.
Okay, I want to ask about those economic conditions that comprise the menu of items on the agenda that were negotiated. But before I get to that, what is the government's rationale for demanding this increase in the tariff? What is the reason that they feel that the tariffs should be increased and rationalized with the rest of the country?
They're arguing that the tariffs at Linden are a sort of inheritance of the old bauxite days when it was a company tongue and all of the workers were given electricity at low or no rates at all. And they were trying to assert that from the time of President Fort Burnham, announcements had been made that the tariffs had to be brought in line with the rest of the country. They were arguing that the consumption rates of electricity in Linden were higher than in other parts of the country. And these were the reasons why they said that it was time that the tariffs or the rates paid by Lindeners should be brought up to the same level as people in other parts of the country. So that was the rationale, the government's rationale. We did not agree with that. We feel that the Lindeners, they're different. In fact, there are two different ways of delivering electricity. One is by a private cooperative, particularly on the west side in Wismar and other areas. And the idea behind the government's move was to bring all of them under the Guyana Power and Light Company, which is a state corporation. So it is a little more complicated than appears in the press. There is an attempt, there's a fear on the part of the members of the cooperative which supplies electricity, particularly in the West Bank, I believe, that the government is attempting to take it over, but we have no part to play in that. So the government might be pursuing a course which is obscure to the political parties and to the listeners themselves.
Okay, now in terms of the government's argument that the tariffs ought to be brought in line with the rest of the country, is the power generating company in Linden profitable? Because I noticed a statement by someone who purports to be, and I think is, the chairman of that company, stating that no one other than the people of Linden will make those decisions about whether or not the tariff should be increased, other than the people of Linden. So, one, is the company profitable? Who owns the company, and what is the level of control the government has in that company?
My understanding is that the company is a cooperative. It is owned by several shareholders. My understanding is that the government has no share in that enterprise. It is owned by Lindeners themselves, and it is profitable. That is my understanding.
Well, if it is profitable and it's owned by the people of Linden, who are basically very strong supporters of the APNU, what is the APNU's rationale for agreeing to conditionally increasing these tariffs once the economic agenda has been satisfied? As the political representatives of the people of Linden, if the company is profitable and it is owned by the people of Linden and the government has no stake in it, what is the basis for the recognition that if the economic conditions are met, that it would be probably prudent to proceed with the increase in the electricity tariff?
Our discussions have nothing to do with the private supply and distribution of electricity. The matter was never on the agenda. We have not discussed it. It's not a concern of ours. There are people who are running a private electricity cooperative, and as far as I'm concerned, they must be allowed to continue to do that. We're not part of the discussion. We're not part of the decision to unify the two systems of supply of electricity in Linden. It's not our interest.
So, if I understand you correctly, the Prime Minister's comment that you guys had agreed to the electricity tariff was erroneous.
Insofar, the comments concerned the supply by the Guyana Power and Light, we said that once the economic measures that we recommended, or the Lindeners recommended, were put in place and were seen to be functioning, then the discussion on the increase in tariffs could be resumed. That is our position. We have not agreed to the imposition of tariffs. What we are asking for is the implementation of certain economic measures. When those measures kick in, we believe that the discussion could resume. But it is a matter for the Lindeners to indicate their own willingness to have a different electricity supply. It is not a matter for APNU. It's a matter for central government and the people within the region themselves.
Okay. And just for clarification, the power company in Linden that we're talking about that is owned by shareholders in Linden, do they supply the entire Linden community with power, or does the GPL, Guyana Power and Light, share in the distribution and supply of electricity in Linden?
My understanding is that they supply mainly on the West Bank. That is the Wismar community. And the Guyana Power and Light, there are two companies operating. There are two means of delivery. And I think the Bauxite company has its own power arrangements. So you can say perhaps there are three sources of electricity supply.